The BRICS Summit 2025 happening now. This is the big competitor to the dollar. There's a couple of different things that are in play with how world monetary systems are changing starting, in the last few years, but really going to be ramping up starting now. Lucas, you've been keeping a close eye on this. There's BRICS Pay, and then we've also got the Chinese interchange system, and these are competing with the dollar. What's happening at the BRICS Summit that really caught your eye?
So much. You know, the first thing that comes to mind as you bring up this picture is Narendra Modi. Because the thing that I've been wondering with BRICS and with everything that's going on in the world today is does the I in BRICS stand for India or Iran? And I say that because, and I don't mean to turn all of our conversations to Iran, by the way. Sorry about that. But as but as there,
I personally don't mind because I think what's going on with Iran is one of the most important and impactful things that's happening in the world, as from our conversation that we had about the Iran Israel war. So I don't mind. Go ahead. But I believe it's India that's the I in BRICS.
well, I mean, BRICS comes from um, the naming of an investment portfolio for I don't know, Chase Manhattan or J.P. Morgan. So and then that name was adopted. Some people say the Global South. Uh, maybe alternative to the dollar empire of the United States and Great Britain, um, and sort of their relationship in the world. So just a note on where BRICS comes from, because that wasn't a name that they chose. If you remember back to 2008, because I've had my eye on BRICS ever since 2008, whenever the financial collapse occurred, and we in the United States were, there were there were concerns that we were going to see, you know, I'm putting scare quotes around this too, Great Depression, or as I like to say, the Great Contraction, but the Great Depression era level pain, economic pain here in the United States, and we did not see that. Part of the reason was that the retraction that was felt first in places that, or in countries around the world where people had invested their money and they could pull that out, and that had a lot to do with these emerging markets of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Well, some said that what we got away with, what the United States got away with from 2008 for the next decade, 12 years, whatever, is that the US's main export was inflation, and that's kind of the continued faith in the dollar, but our printing of dollars and the way that we did that allowed us to dodge a bullet. And I'm still theorizing that the US is going to get to play one more card with this stable coin ridiculous nonsense that's about to happen. And if that swoops up all the treasuries, then we may get one more free pass. Who knows if this lasts for 2 years or 5 years? I don't think the dollar's got another 10 personally.
Well, um, I've been predicting the demise of the dollar since 2003, and I was brought
So have many. This is what I'm saying. Like if the dollar keep getting a free pass, somehow there's this new get out of jail free card. They keep pulling rabbits out of their hat somehow.
Yeah, I was even raised with a grandfather and uncle sitting around a table, talking about silver and gold, in the 80s and the 90s. So, um, but things do seem to be coming to a head. One letter that we don't, I guess we have South Africa in BRICS, but we don't have Africa. Going back to Iran, I think Iran is very important because the leading economies in
Well,
BRICS.
is Iran allowed to trade in this system because they've been under sanctions? There has been strong controls that have been put in place over Iran. Iran has managed to get around these, I think, principally by trading with China. I mean, isn't most of the oil exports of Iran now is going to China, and somehow that's
Well,
just allowed, I
sanctions
guess.
sanctions are the United States and Europe, um, abusing the dependence on the not the dollar, but actually the SWIFT payment system, which is the secure channel that communicates from bank to bank, which is
Yeah, the entire banking system that is predicated on the Federal Reserve.
well, maybe this is where it gets interesting because in part the basis of world trade is based on the dollar instead of gold coming out of World War II. But there's also the communication aspect for sending messages and sanctions that we place, because if you actually have dollars and you put them in a satchel, and you take them to an airport and you cart them around the world, people are still trading in dollars. But that's not very efficient. So one of the methods that we use is to deny countries the use of of the SWIFT messaging system. And so you can imagine a text message system that exists for banks, to pass their money around with, and BRICS Pay and CIPS, the cross-border interbank settlements from China, are two of these systems. Now, the BRICS Pay, I don't know if it is actually in existence yet. I think it's being formulated. I'm not sure if there's going to be some sort of notion of a BRICS currency, or a special drawing right or a stable coin that's based on something like a World Bank system of where the various countries who are participating in the BRICS system are holding reserves in that system. I'm not sure what that's going to. I don't think that's been hammered out yet. But Iran is very important, going back to Iran, because if the BRICS pay, or if BRICS is about creating an alternative global trade system to that of the United States and Western Europe, and the two dominant economies that are entering into it are China and Russia, and one of the markets that they're looking to have access to is Africa. Well, if you go west from China, you go to Pakistan and then Iran, and then you come to the Persian Gulf, and you can put things on a boat and take them into Africa, down to Kenya, to Ethiopia, and further down to South Africa. Or if you're in Russia and you want to be sending things to Africa, then you can take them on their north-south corridor, in which Iran is also very important. And especially, Syria might have been a linchpin or very important in that setup, but the United States and especially Great Britain were very interested in overthrowing Syria, made some radical friends to bring Syria into a new regime. I'm talking about al-Jolani. So we can. I've been expecting to see more fireworks in Syria coming forward, by the way, because this area is becoming so important in a world that's sort of recentering. But long story short, the BRICS Summit is coming in Rio de Janeiro, and we've come to a this is moving from an idea that was in a world that was still relying on the dollar to one that is very much realized. And the CIPS system is being used. The CIPS payment system is open for use. It is the Chinese system. It's based on the renminbi. Countries are no longer required to use the dollar, and China has, as we know here in the United States, China has trading partners all around the world. And as Donald Trump has engaged in his tariff wars to try to renegotiate the value of the United States dollar compared to other countries, and we add on that the Build Back Better bill, which is going to add trillions and trillions of dollars of debt, or to continue to dilute the purchasing power of dollars. I'm not seeing a lot of great reasons for countries to continue to remain in this system. And then if we add again something Vladimir Putin said the other day that I found interesting. He said the $300 billion of Russian assets that were seized. So we've not just been sanctioning Russia, but we've been seizing their assets that were in American and British banks. He said, well, maybe that's the price that we pay for getting off the American system. And that leads me to I don't know, a quote, although I don't know who said it, that really describes, gosh, I wish I remember who said this, that describes the situation really well. Because part of, if we ask ourselves, why are people still using the dollar system with all of this occurring? Well, if you owe the bank $10,000, you have a problem. If you owe a bank $10 million, the bank has a problem. And so this is part of the reason that countries have stayed in the system, and the United States has continued to accumulate so much debt because we have a problem. We've been caught in a lie.
It's also this idea that you have a rate of return and you've got to find a rate of return somewhere else. I mean, this is an infinite pot of return, whether we're actually having, massive devaluation of the dollar. It's just a place where it's traditionally been a risk-free rate of return. I think that day is coming to an end, but this is the lie that everybody believes, and as long as everybody believes the same lie, it becomes the truth. So I think that's where we're at. I did look it up. Iran has been a member of BRICS since 2024, so a relatively recent development, and not a surprise that this has flown under the radar since we weren't paying attention to Iran as much until Israel attacked Iran, and then been brought to the forefront here. And it looks like the primary way that Iran's been dodging these sanctions is what I had said. They're selling their oil to China. They're doing the payments through the Chinese system, so they're selling oil for Yuan, and then I guess they're buying technology and whatever else from China with the Yuan that they get back. So this is the important trading partner here for China, and China just pretty much thumbing their nose at the U.S. and saying we're not going to play ball with your sanctions at all.
Well, and I just saw that Iran bought a bunch of jets from China too. Part of why I'm beginning to question, the and maybe it's wrong to focus on the letters in the acronym that describes this global South alliance, but India's allegiance is vacillating between the East and the West. We've seen their relationship with Israel. Um, uh, I don't know. I don't know if you saw, but a lot of the internal cells and spies that Iran busted after the Israeli attack turned out to be Indian nationals who were living in Iran. And there was also some of the, or a lot of the vulnerabilities that were taken advantage of by Israeli intelligence, and probably American and British intelligence services too, came from code that was written for software packages, from everything from their electrical grid to their aviation, defense, et cetera, were written by Indian programmers. So India has long been courted by Russia and the United States because the size of their population, their geographic location as a neighbor to China, and how do I put this? The Russia and the United States playing off those characteristics of India to try to limit China's dominance in the world. And I'm not sure how strong the relationship between India and China is today, but as far as opening up these routes to Africa, and and also sort of allegiances being brought to the fore with regards to the conflict that occurred in Iran, it seems that India is um, aligning more with the West and is also becoming isolated in doing so.
I think you're right on that. I China and India feel in many ways to be competitors in that they have traditionally had a technological base. They have a populace that's capable of doing technology, manufacturing, low level technology stuff. And so when we see the likes of Apple contemplating where they want to shift production, India is a natural competitor to China. So as China has seen some of the dependence on the West get shifted. It's been shifted to, some of Southeast Asia, but also to India. So I think that's probably a fairly cool relationship in the fact that they're both trying to play in the same space. Now, I think China is moving up as far as its ability to compete in the world stage. I mean, definitely is now on par with the best scientists, best engineers in Western Europe and also in the U.S. So I think China has moved itself somewhat out of that space, but still has such a large landmass and such a large population that it continues to be able to work kind of both sides of it. So I think if there's anybody in the world that really is largely independent of any other country, it's probably China, except for some of its dependence on things like oil from Iran.
Well, uh, maybe, but they have their thorium reactors. Um,
Well, I'll
who
tell you,
knows?
I mean, the petrochemical pipeline is still important. Like whether it's powering cars is not as important as it is as a source of hydrocarbons for plastics and a whole other, industrialized componentry that's needed. I think I've heard people talk about like how important oil is in the world, and it's not just to make gas. Like that's a part of what it does, but it certainly supplies like an input to most of our industrialized production. It's important for textiles, it's important for a whole host of stuff. So I mean, every industrialized country needs a steady supply of oil to continue to exist in the way that we have set up our modern economy.
Yeah, but I look at Chinese the China's the growth of the solar industry, the diversification of their energy grid, with solar, again with their focus on innovative technologies like thorium nuclear reactors, and I think that if if I had a country along the Persian Gulf, and it was focused on the production of oil, I might be thinking about diversifying that, which is in part too why I think the gold exchange that we're seeing in Saudi Arabia is also so interesting, and part of why why Western powers.
Energy production is important, no doubt about it, and diversifying those through nuclear and solar are critical for any industrialized nation. I think I've heard it said that there is no significant economy that doesn't have an energy surplus. But
Well, and
hydrocarbons are a different kind of a thing. I mean, it's for making tires and roads and all that kind of stuff. You can't replace those hydrocarbons with solar. You can't replace that with thorium. That
well,
steady supply of hydrocarbons is going to be needed, and it's not going to diminish anytime soon. And there is no replacement for it because you can't grow plants out of hydrocarbon-based economy. You just need that stuff if you're going to build cities and roads and tires.
well, but Russia and Venezuela have oil too. There are other places to get oil around the world, and I'm just saying if
No
we're
doubt, but China is buying it at a discount. So because Iran has very few other options, they get to say, well, we'll buy from you, but we're going to buy it at a 10 to 15, 20% discount. And I think Iran's going to be fine with that, and so is China. So, they're buying it on the cheap.
it's, I mean, all true. I just think that regardless of the persistence of our the need for oil, any country that has, you know, is a one trick pony with regards to its economy is looking to diversify that. Um, I think that's very true for Western Asia, for what we call the Middle East, and they are looking at becoming a hub for these corridors from Eastern Asia and North Asia, Russia and China, for more African trade. So and I think they're well positioned to do so, and that is a good moves for them to be making. Um, you brought up stable coins
Well,
earlier.
actually, wait a minute. While we stick on this, I got curious for a second as this conversation progressed. I was thinking to myself, all right, diversification. What's one of the most important things that a modern economy can produce? And it's chips, it's silicon. It's the reason why the U.S. passed the CHIPS Act. It's the reason that it courted TSMC to come back to Arizona and set up a plant. If Iran is set to become a diversified player, then it has to have its own chip production. I don't know that they have any substantive chip production. Have you heard anything about that? I know that they've got at least one company that does this. When I did like the first cursory look, I found the Parse Semiconductor company, but I've never really heard that this had any real traction, and I think it's labeled as defunct in Wikipedia. So I don't really know if this got off the ground or if they're keeping it secret. Have you heard anything with chip production in Iran?
I haven't heard anything with chip production, but I know that they make a lot of drones. Like whenever I was following more closely the Russian Ukrainian conflict, there was a sort of a constant hum about the sophistication of the drones that Russia had been buying off of Iran. I also know that Iran has focused um, on engineering in their academics as a nation, and one of the things that we see as a result of this isolation that the United States and the dollar system have pressed on the likes of Russia and China and Iran is that they have been forced to make their own supply lines and to make it themselves. And that sort of independence, as we come out of the COVID shutdowns and the bottlenecks in the global supply chain, and then into a world of conflict, and not only that, but like un uh, a world in which the supply chain provenance and security is called into question. And I'm thinking about Israeli, the Israeli quote unquote asymmetrical warfare or terrorist attacks with pagers in Lebanon and Palestine, and also the insertion of drones into Iran and to Russia. I it, I am nervous about our vulnerabilities here in the United States. And I'm you know me, I'm an open border libertarian. And but um, I'm the type of open border libertarian who believes we ought to be keeping our word and thinking about the benefit of everyone, or else we have massive security problems with people who want to get close to us and bury a knife in our ribs. So
Well, I
I
guess I guess this answers that question. As far as what I can tell with the little bit of research that I did, there is no Iranian-based semiconductor industry. There have been people that have been calling on Iran to produce them themselves. It doesn't look like they're using Chinese componentry, but rather that they're continuously being found to have smuggled in Western tech. And I think it also relates to something that you pointed out to me the other day, that Iran is moving off of GPS and is moving to the Chinese positioning system.
Yeah, the BETO, which really took me aback. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, Iran. I don't know when they killed American GPS coordinates, but you know, it the dominance. We always talk about the dollar as a metric for the dominance of the American empire, or the global empire that exists somewhat based out of the United States. But the GPS may have been a great metric, and it will be interesting to see how quickly other countries shut off and convert over to this Chinese system. This will
Well, the
be.
Europeans have their own standard too. If I recall, that was I remember that being kind of a big deal when the EU launched their own. That it was supposedly superior to GPS, and that many were looking at that as a dual standard or a way to end this dependence upon U.S. technology. So
I don't know. I think that might just be an augmentation system, but
let me look it up. I think there is, but keep going.
well, just fascinating, because this also brings to mind Starlink, because other innovations that are happening in the world are these um, global corporations, and Elon's Starlink I've found very interesting in um, how threatening that will be also to nations, and it puts Elon in a very interesting position, because going back to how we started this with a conversation about, is money the gold that's held in the bank, or the secure delivery of that, or the promise that the trust that it will be moved from account to account, and the importance of that messaging system. Communication is of utmost importance, and the United States has used and abused um, its communication system in payments, in navigation, to control, or uh, to open up vulnerabilities in our enemies, and that there is now a global communication system that is beholden to no one but the owner of that company. However complex that might be, it gets very interesting. And Elon's um, the effect that he brought in the Ukrainian conflict, for maintaining the Ukrainian resistance after Russia took down communication in Ukraine. Interesting. Also, the um,
Well,
the
did you see this? I threw it on the screen. This just got announced yesterday, I believe. If you're caught using Starlink in Iran, you are subject to flogging. Not death, but definitely not pleasant.
and flogging doesn't mean brushing your teeth. No, I did see this,
Well, it
and
means whipped with a cat of nine tails until you bleed. It's one of the most painful punishments I've heard that can be inflicted upon somebody. It's you definitely survive it, but you're not going to be a happy camper, not for a long time.
well, I mean, were you aware that the let's call it the Blitzkrieg, the Iranian Blitzkrieg that Israel launched, that killed the generals and the nuclear scientists, and took out, like, was this coordinated attack with these drones that had been built inside the country and kept nested in trucks or warehouses close to the places where they were going to be launched. All of that took off the day after Starlink was turned on in Iran. And I haven't seen it confirmed, but I heard reports that it was like they were using Starlink for the communication between those devices, so that they could evade Iranian monitoring of the communication channels in that country. So I was not surprised to see this ban on Starlink, or the draconian measures for people caught using it.
Yeah, it definitely circumvents the controls that Iran wants to have on internet and the flow of information within the country. Well, we've got to keep a close eye on this BRICS summit. Definitely, there's the big players in the world that are aligning against the U.S. dollar hegemony, rounding up some of the ways that Iran has been skirting sanctions and talking about some of these other systems that the U.S. has set up in the past. But a lot of the things that I'm looking at, man, these things have just come out within the last year or two. So really, this the whole world has shifted significantly since 2020. So just the last 5 years, if you thought you knew how the world worked, I mean, you kind of got to realign your thinking about the way that geopolitics and the world powers are set up, because things have changed significantly just in the last few years. So if you haven't thought about how weapon systems are targeting, how global positioning is working, these alliances, there's some stuff here that really needs to be paid attention to. And I've heard, when people are talking about this, like some of the thinking in the United States is outdated by 10 years, sometimes 20 years. But even if your thinking is outdated from even through the last few years, you're behind. So there's a lot to keep up on as far as how things have changed. And I think that what's going to come out of this BRICS summit's likely to have ramifications along that same level. So definitely have to recap this. But if you get the chance, check it out. Look into what's going on with the BRICS summit. It's happening now.
I think the thinking in America is outdated. There's this reliance on coercion. Um, we got to the place where we are in the world, or we climbed to the top of the ladder by keeping our word and providing aid to other countries around the world. So we need to get back to that. Now, another thing of note that put me in mind of the growing prominence of BRICS before we close it out was when Trump visited the G7 leaders I believe it was in Calgary, in Canada recently. And the first thing that he said to them was, "Remember when this was G8 and Russia was here too?" And part of the fight that Trump is having in the internal conversation in Washington D.C. is that reminding Americans that we can know that there are ways of getting around the American game, and other countries around the world have proceeded to do that. So, catch you next time on FOMO, and we'll keep tracking the BRICS.
All right. We'll see you next time.